Here we go again. Listen, I don't want to talk about impeachment. I have to talk about impeachment because it's happening. It's happening. So, I know a lot of you don't agree with my views on impeachment. That's totally fine. All I can tell you guys is I sincerely and truly hope that all of my critics are correct about impeachment. I want my critics to be correct, and I want myself to be wrong when it comes to impeachment. Because if I'm wrong, that means that this is a victory for the left. But if I'm right in what I think is going to happen, it's going to hurt the left. So anyway, here we are again, another impeachment story. The Democrats have now officially unveiled 2 articles of impeachment against Donald Trump. So here's what they are. Here's what they're for. One of them is for abuse of authority, and one of them is for obstruction. Now, I'm going to get to the obstruction one in a second. First, let's talk about the abuse of power one. That is probably, as you've already predicted or already know, it's about the situation with Ukraine. So Donald Trump spoke to the Ukrainian president and basically said, I mean, the Republicans will argue this up and down and say, no, I'm not accurately categorizing this. But he basically was like, hey, man, do an investigation into the Bidens for me. Because we hear that they're corrupt. So do an investigation into the Bidens, and, basically then you'll get your subsidy, your weapons. But implied is like, until you do that, I'm going to hold up the aid for you and your country. That's more or less what happened. Now, again, the Republicans argue, there was no quid pro quo. There was no quid pro quo. Honestly, that is such a weaselly argument, because anybody who who reads through what the transcript or the pseudo-transcript or whatever you want to call it, anybody who reads through that is going to go, well, yeah, obviously that's what he's trying to do. Now, I think we can have a serious conversation about, is that actually impeachable? And is that something that's unique to Trump? Because, of course, that's how this is portrayed in mainstream media, and they're also massively full of shit. The idea is like, he's crossed a line that has never been crossed before. Yes. And then you get into Hillary Clinton when she was a candidate. Her campaign had a back channel to Ukraine, and the Ukrainians gave Hillary's team dirt on Paul Manafort. And there was an article in Politico in 2017 about how the Ukrainians helping Hillary backfired, of course, because Trump got elected. And now you have mainstream media and the Democrats going, that's a conspiracy theory. It's a conspiracy theory that the Ukrainians helped Hillary. No, it's not. That's just true. It was reported in 2017 when this issue wasn't so hotly politicized. And then now in retrospect, they act like, no, that didn't happen. Yes, it did. It did happen. That's literally how we know about the corruption of Paul Manafort, is because Hillary's team worked with Ukraine to get the dirt on Paul Manafort. So, but again, this goes back to the point of like, okay, so working with foreign governments to getting dirt on your political opponents. We could all agree that's generally bad. That's not a good thing. But is it really illegal? Is it really impeachable? How big of a problem is this? Now, in the case of Trump, you can say, and it's fair to say, well, he did that extra step. The extra step was not just, hey, Ukrainian government, look into the Biden's corruption and give me dirt on it. He didn't just do that. He was like, the aid issue was implied there as well, of like, maybe I'll hold it back if you don't do it. And if you do what I'm asking, well, then we'll release the aid. So, is this something that's bad? Yeah, I'd say it's bad. Should he have done it? No, he shouldn't have done it. Is it a little bit of a step beyond what Hillary did? Yes. But does that mean what Hillary did was right? No, it doesn't. And it's also super annoying that the media just won't admit the obvious about Hillary and about how, like, well, yeah, we're kind of hypocrites too, because that's still really bad what she did. They just act like she didn't even do it, which is just so frustrating, because the mainstream media, there are like corporate Democrat central. Whatever the narrative is for the corporate Democrats, that's what they go with. And it's really obnoxious, and it's really frustrating. And anytime Trump says anything, even if it's true, they're just like, conspiracy. It's like, no, I hate Trump, and he's a buffoon, but sometimes you guys just throw that out there, and you're wrong. Okay. So basically, the impeachment for abuse of power is over the Ukraine thing. I think this is a weak angle to go at Trump. But let's be honest here, he also did do the thing that they're saying he did. Like, That's the part that I don't think people understand about my criticisms of impeachment. That my criticisms of impeachment have always been about strategy and empirically how I think it's going to play out. My criticism over impeachment, I think there are better ways to go after him, but this is like, substantively, it's not like the Democrats are wrong here. Like, Trump did the thing that they're saying he did. Trump withheld the aid, and he withheld the aid. This was all implied. It's not like he's no quid pro quo. Right, yeah, you didn't say, it is time for us to do a quid pro quo. He didn't do that, but it was obvious. It was implied. It was, anybody who's familiar with how these things work understand that, like, this is what he was doing. I'll withhold the aid, announce the investigation on Biden, so on and so forth. So did he actually do it? Yeah. So do I think that this is going to pass the House? Yeah. Impeachment is going to pass the House, I think. I could be wrong, but I think it's going to pass the House. Now that gets to the next thing, which is obstruction. Now, when you heard obstruction, probably like when I heard obstruction, what did you think of? I thought, oh, Mueller report. Now, again, this is an instance where I told you guys all along with the Mueller report, they're not going to get him on collusion with Russia. They're just not going to get it. It's not going to happen. Not happening. And I was right. But is it true that throughout the whole process of the Mueller report, Trump did try to like throw wrenches in their whole process and did like obstruct? Well, yeah, of course. Again, that's another thing where it's like, I think he's obviously guilty. We could have a discussion as to how serious a crime that is. Like, okay, if he's obstructing an investigation that is actually a BS investigation, is that so bad? I don't know. We could have a debate about that. But he did do it. He did obstruct. But this article of impeachment is not about obstruction for the Mueller report. This is about obstruction of the impeachment inquiry. And the Democrats are saying Trump is directing, quote, the unprecedented, categorical, and indiscriminate defiance of subpoenas. That's what they say. So he's refusing to cooperate with the impeachment investigation, and they're impeaching him over his refusal to cooperate with the impeachment inquiry. That's what it is. Now, on this one, I don't think they have a strong case, and here's why. Trump is taking it to the court system. So if he was just like, I'm not going to participate, and I'm also not going to go to the court system, well, then, yeah, you could say, well, that's obstruction of the investigation, and therefore we're going after you for that. But my understanding is he's saying, no, I'm not going to cooperate, and I'm going to take this to the court system and hope that the court system sides with me. So he actually is, even though you know he's a petty authoritarian goon, there's no doubt about that, and in his heart of hearts, he wouldn't participate in any way, shape, or form. My understanding is that if you take it to the court system, you're allowed to do that. That's like a check and balance. That's another branch of the government where he's saying, I don't agree with what you're doing. I think it's nonsense. So I'm going to challenge this by going to the court system. So I don't think that it's fair to say that's obstruction. Now, I don't know. Maybe you guys have read stuff that I haven't read. Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if he's actually saying, like, no, I'm not going to participate, and I'm not even taking it to the courts. I'm just not participating at all. In which case, then I think you have a fair argument if he's obstructing the inquiry. But I thought he was taking it to the court system, which I don't think is obstructing it. The Democrats would just have to wait for it to be adjudicated in court. You just have to wait for that. Whether you like it or not, that's part of the process. So anyway, those are the two articles of impeachment: obstruction of the impeachment inquiry and abuse of authority for what happened with Ukraine. I think it's going to get through the House. I think both are going to get through the House. Now, I'm going to get to another angle of impeachment in another story that we're doing here in a little bit, which is the response from the Republicans, which is actually a really interesting story. But in terms of this, I think it's going to get through the House, and then it's going to die in the Senate. That's what's going to happen, because you need over 20 Republican votes. That's what I like to call mission impossible. So all this time and all this effort, kind of like the Mueller report, where it was like at the end of it, they were like, see, what happened was the sun was in our eyes, and then we realized that there was no collusion, and he's getting away scot-free. Kind of going to be a similar situation. Everybody's going to be so jovial and dancing in the street, and Twitter's going to be on fire, and everybody's going to be so smug the day he gets impeached in the House. And people are going to tweet at me like, aha, Kyle was wrong. Well, no, I'm telling you right now, I think he's going to get through the House, so I'm not wrong. But in terms of the Senate, it's going to die in the Senate, and then all those people who are, tweeting the Slay Queen memes about Pelosi are going to turn around on a dime and be like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. What an unfair, terrible process. Who could have seen this coming? I did. And I'm explaining it beforehand. So I'm just telling you right now that that's how it's going to happen. So I think it's going to die in the Senate. Now, the new Monmouth poll on this is interesting. So overall, when you look at all the polls and you average them out, it honestly is about half and half. Like half the country wants him impeached, half the country doesn't want him impeached. The newer Monmouth poll on this that just came out recently is 50% said the president should not be impeached and removed from office. 45% say he should be impeached and removed from office. So 50% shouldn't be impeached and removed, 45% impeach and remove. And as the headline in The Hill said, roughly unchanged. It's roughly unchanged from the beginning of the impeachment inquiry. This is kind of what I feared, guys, is that the Democrats just waste so much political capital and they go all in on this, and they didn't even really move the needle. And then, like I said, my prediction, and again, I hope to God I'm wrong about this, but when it dies in the Senate, you're going to see his approval rating go up, just like what happened with Bill Clinton. The House impeached Clinton, and then it died in the Senate, and then his approval rating went up. I think the same thing's going to happen here. I think it's going to get through the House, going to die in the Senate, and his approval rating is going to go up. And then everybody's going to be like, oh my God, so what exactly did we get out of this whole thing? And the answer is going to be beep, 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 beep. Now, the final point I want to make in this segment is very simple. It's, if you were to do impeachment, how can you do it in a way that would work and that would also be a net positive politically? And I know, like, a lot of people respond to me and say, I don't know why you look at it like this, Kyle. It's not about politics. It's about holding him accountable for all the terrible things he's done. And my response to them is only that impeachment is quite literally a political process. So you have to weigh the politics of it. By definition, it's a political process. It's not a judicial process. It's not like he's actually going to jail, even if it goes 100% in the Democrats' direction. That's not going to happen. It's a political process. It's similar to like an indictment. That's all it is. So if you were to go down the road of impeachment, what the Democrats should have done from day one, and it's obviously they're not going to do this, and even if I was in the room and making this argument, they'd probably swat me aside. But I would have done impeachment over emoluments corruption, and I would have done impeachment over the illegal war in Saudi Arabia. And there's a reason why I picked those things. Now, in those instances, assuming we went that road, it actually probably would get through the House, and then it would die in the Senate that way too. But, and here's the caveat, and this makes all the difference in the world to me. If you were to have the hearings over the emoluments corruption and over the illegal war in Saudi Arabia, where we're backing a genocide of babies, okay, and women and children, people getting slaughtered because of our tax dollars and us backing a genocidal dictator and arming him and funding him, if you had hearings where the hearings, day in and day out, you were discussing these serious issues. You're talking about how Donald Trump registered 8 new businesses in Saudi Arabia when he was on the campaign trail. You're talking about how Donald Trump has taken over $300,000 through his D.C. hotel from Saudi Arabia. You're talking about all the money that Trump has taken, all the corruption. You're talking about the favors for a brutal authoritarian regime, a theocracy. You're talking about not even a slap on the wrist when they killed Jamal Khashoggi. You're talking about the multi-billion-dollar weapons deal to this evil country, which is carrying out a genocide. You're talking about the logistics of us helping them and refueling them as they do it. If you're doing hearings and you're talking about genocide in Yemen, you're talking about corruption with Saudi Arabia, those hearings, with the nonstop coverage of those hearings, I think it would hurt Trump. Because the kind of arguments you're making matter. Not just that you're making arguments against Trump, because anybody could do that. It's, okay, how good are your arguments? And I just think the angle that the Democrats picked is kind of weak, because Trump always has that, pun intended, Trump card, where he could just say, like, yeah, I was trying to get dirt on Biden because they're really corrupt. And I, as president, have every right to stop corruption, and that's what I'm doing. And that's his full court press. That's his reaction. And that's not a bad reaction. Again, I don't think what he did was right. It wasn't. But that counter-argument is at least going to be a 50-50 proposition in people's minds who are apolitical, not paying attention, and they try to hear both sides of this. They're going to be like, okay, he's saying you held up the aid to Ukraine, you're asking for favors for personal politics. Okay, got it. And his argument is, but yeah, he's actually really corrupt, and that's why I wanted that, because I want to put a stop to the corruption. I mean, that's probably not true, because Trump is totally selfish, but is this really that bad? Is this really impeachment worthy? And I think that's why you have, it's not like 75% of the country supports impeachment. It's not like even 60% of the country supports impeachment. It's that 45% support, 50% don't in the newest poll. I think that if you did impeachment and if you went the way that I'm advising, and all the hearings and all the nonstop media coverage over the genocide in Yemen, Donald Trump's corrupt, Donald Trump's taking the money from Saudi Arabia, he's taking it. I don't think the polls would be 45% pro-impeachment, 50% anti-impeachment. I think if you went the road I'm advising them to go, I think the numbers would be like maybe 55 to 60% pro-impeachment. So, and that matters, guys. That matters, because then we're talking about a real situation where even though he would get acquitted in the Senate, it still might be a political victory for the Democrats, because people are going to look at it and go, those are really, really serious allegations. And if we're actually aiding a genocide and he's actually corrupted by Saudi Arabia and all this money he's taking, we got to get him out of there ASAP. And so it could help the Democrats. It could help with the upcoming election. And it would be a devastating case to make against him, even though it would lose in the Senate. In this instance, I don't think the case is strong enough where it's going to help the Democrats. So anyway, that's my breakdown. I know you guys have heard my take on impeachment 1,000 times over, but I had to give you the specific articles of impeachment that we have here, and I wanted to give you a breakdown surrounding it. So we'll see what happens. Again, I think it's going to get through the House. I think it's going to die in the Senate, and then I think his approval rating will go up. So I'm not looking forward to that. I really, sincerely, genuinely hope that I'm wrong, and I hope that all of my critics are right, because that would be the better political outcome if I'm wrong.